Hey YouTube, if you clicked on this title, you probably already know how to bake, but you may not know how to assemble a wedding cake. And I'm assembling a wedding cake. This is something I did for about 12 years as a business. I'm retired, but I'm pulling myself out of retirement to make a small wedding cake for my nephew and his bride-to-be. So I thought I would just turn on the camera and kind of show you the process. So if you've never done this, this is going to just be an easy little two-tiered 6 and 8 inch cake. And we're going to decorate it with flowers at the wedding. So I'm going to just walk you through this because I'm already here, so I might as well turn on the camera. First, let me tell you, these are tricks I've learned from 12 years making custom wedding cakes every weekend, solid year-round. So first things first, you are going to need pans in the size of your cake, which for us will be a 6 and an 8, and 2 each, obviously. You're going to have those. You are going to need various KitchenAids. I have a 6 and a 5, and I also have a separate 3-quart bowl, and I have an extra 6-quart bowl. So have some extra mixing bowls or be ready to wash and recycle. You're going to need a whip and a paddle attachment to get the cake pans ready. You're going to need parchment and nonstick spray. So do not skip the parchment. It will make your life so much easier when you're taking the cakes out of the pans. You're going to need scissors to cut because we're going to cut circles that go inside the pans. We're going to need a Sharpie to mark the parchment paper. And when you put the pans in the oven, you will want, and this is very old, but you are going to need, I don't even know what these are called, Bakelite strips maybe. They are silverish on the outside and plain fabric on the inside. And what you're going to do with these is get them wet. They come with a pin that you can stick your finger with if you try hard enough. What you're going to do with these is you're going to get them wet. And before the cakes go in the pan and go in the oven, you're going to wrap it wet around the pan and pin it. So you have it around the pan like that, and that goes in the oven for the bake time. And that actually helps with not getting that dome top on your cake. So you'll have more of a level rise and you won't be trimming off quite so much of your cake. That's just a trick I learned a long time ago, and for some cakes it's just absolutely necessary. You are going to need, as you go along, you will need cardboard cake rounds to put the cakes on. So when you take them out of the pans, you're going to put them on the corresponding size cake, little cardboard round, and then we're going to use a fresh one once they're ready to go together and be assembled. So you're going to need a few of each of those two. We have 8s and 6s. And I have a baseboard. This little cake is the biggest, the bottom layer is 8 inch. So normally I would do, I would always have done a 4 inch bigger than, so if this was an 8 inch base cake, I would have done a 12 inch base board. We are using a small stand for this that needs to be smaller diameter. So we're going to go with a 10 inch round. So it's going to be pretty close to the edge, which normally, again, I would recommend a 12 inch if you're putting these on big cake board, cake bases. But for this particular project, we're just doing the 10 inch baseboard. You will also need icing bags and all the tips. I have a giant collection of tips. I don't have them out yet because I won't be decorating until tomorrow. And I actually won't need any tips, and I'll show you why later on. You're going to need dowels for your assembly because you're going to have, the cake is going to be on a board. The 6 inch cake is going to be on another board, and pencil sharpener and a hammer. We're gonna have fun with that. But definitely if you are stacking cakes, do not think you can just set the cake on top of the cake under it. You cannot. You have to cut dowels. Once the cake is finished and iced, you're going to be trimming dowels that are the depth of the cake. You're going to trim them that deep, and you're going to put, usually for an 8 inch, I'll put 4 probably support dowels in this to hold this cake. You're going to be putting this on top of the dowels and the cake under it for support. And then you're going to also take one whole dowel and cut it the length of the whole stacked cake and hammer it all the way down through and into the baseboard. So if you need to drive an assembled cake around and you do that, you've basically nailed it to the board. It is not going anywhere. I've driven cakes all over the place, up the sides of mountains, big, small, all the things. Use the center dowel and go all the way down through, and you will never have a mishap, unless something happens out of your control. So I'm going to start assembling the cake, and we'll turn the camera around and show you a little bit as we go along. But the baking part, if you're not a bake, if you're here, you probably already know how to bake. So I'm going to get the cakes baked, and then the next step will be probably just taking them out of the pans and showing you how I tort them, which is where you're going to cut them with a leveler, because I do something a little different with my fillings, and we'll just go from there. All right, I'm going to show you my trick for doing the pans. I have just sprayed these with nonstick, and I used to do nonstick spray and then flour the pans really well, and I still found that you unmold the pan and the cake sticks and you're left with a mess. So if you want no mess ever, just please humor me and try this trick. Grease the inside of your pan. I just do the bottom. Just take your parchment, go just wider than the pan, and I just take a Sharpie and draw a circle around the pan like that. And then take one more piece, because we've got two pans, right? Go same width. Tear that. Stack them on top of each other. And then you're just going to fold them, and you can see through parchment enough where you can line up. I don't know if you can see that, but I can see the line through the paper. So you're just going to line up that circle so you've got a half circle. Fold it in half. We're going to fold it in half again to save some time, because when you're doing production cakes and you have lots of events in one weekend, you need to save all the time you can, and then just cut it. And I cut it just inside the black line, just because I don't like the idea of ink, near the food. And there you have two, just less than 8-inch circles that will go inside your pan like that. I'm going to do the other one, and it's, it'll stick to the nonstick spray that's in there, and then you're going to pour your batter on that. And when you unmold, guess what? It's going to come right out, and you just peel the paper off, and you have a perfect flat bottom surface to your cake. Little insider trick. Right, we have cake batter in the pan, and these have been sitting in a cup of water, and just wring them out, but they're still definitely wet. And you are just going to wrap them around pretty snug and use these little pins and just pin them on like that. And then you just take them off when you're done baking. So that one's ready to go in, and we'll do this one. All right, these are ready to go in the oven. I'll see you back here in a little bit. So we have baked and took the strips off the outside of the pans and cooled them in the pans for about 10 minutes. And I'm just going to show you my trick for getting these out onto the little cake boards with nice, clean bottom edges. So I'm just going to take a knife. Hopefully you can see this with the camera sitting where it is. Take a knife and just loosen the edges. Take your cake board with the shiny side up. There's two sides, so shiny side up, just put it on the top of the cake. Turn it over. Pan's still a little bit hot, but look how easy this will come off when you do the parchment. And then you just peel the parchment off, and see, you've got a nice square flat edge to work with, and it just makes decorating and dealing with torting the layers and all of that so much easier. So do the parchment, and there's both of them with the parchment peeled off. They look amazing. And this will be the little top 6-inch layer. I'm just going to let these cool overnight, and then tomorrow I'll make the fillings, and then tomorrow we will assemble the rest of this. So I'll see you tomorrow. So if you're still here and you're wanting to know how to assemble wedding cakes, first of all, let me just say, do not ever try to bake, fill, and decorate a wedding cake any cake all in the same day. You'll make yourself miserable. I always bake the whole cake the day before, wrap it, and put it in the refrigerator. And then you have a nice, cool, chilled cake because I slice these in half. So I'm going to want to cut these. You're going to want to spread icing on them. And if you try and do it when it's fresh out of the oven, even after it's cooled, you will make yourself miserable. This is a lot of years of cake decorating speaking to you. So plan for 2 days for any cake, but especially wedding cakes. Give yourself a day to bake and a day to fill, frost, and decorate, and sometimes longer than that. I've had wedding cakes take definitely more than 2 days. So I am going to unwrap these, and I'm going to show you some of the tools that you will need that we didn't go over in the beginning. This is for the assembly and decorating part. You're going to need the bags, icing bags. I just bought disposable bags because I'm not doing this as a business anymore or full-time. There are more permanent bags you can get that are like a sort of a vinyl-y material that you can wash and reuse. I'm just going to throw these away. You just cut the end, and you'll put your tips. There's an adapter you can use for the tips, or you can just put the tip right in the bag, which is what I will do. This is a tip. It's just a big star tip. I'm going to use that to do a little line around each layer, because we're going to fill it with specialty fillings that I have made. I made caramel fresh caramel on the stove. I made a chocolate fudge filling, and in the fridge is a fresh homemade Bavarian cream with real vanilla beans in it. You are going to also, with the icing bags, we're going to use this big icing tip, and I'll show you how to use that. You will need, for splitting these, all 4 of these layers are going to get split in half. So instead of having a 2-layer cake, we'll just do some sciencey mechanics. We'll do some mechanics for a second. Instead of doing 2 layers of cake with a layer of filling in between, which I think is too much cake and not enough filling, I always split each one of these in half. So you have 4 layers of cake, 3 layers of filling in each wonderful slice of cake. Especially for a wedding, it's just really nice. It's a smaller piece that you're going to serve, but they're going to get a lot of filling in there. To split those in half, you're going to use a cake. I don't even remember what this is called because it's been so long, but it's like a little, it's almost like a cheese slicer. It has a little wire that you just will pull it through the cake and it slices it nicely. And it has, I don't know if you can see that, but it's got little markings so you can set it to, I just, hold it against yourself and just move the wire so you can set it to whatever depth you want to cut those directly in half. The only other 3 things, I guess, large cake decorating spatula, which if you've watched my other videos, you have seen this in action because I also use it to cut cheese curd, which is a new thing that I do instead of cake. This is an Ateco. It's old. It's just for smoothing the icing. You're going to go around the bottom and do that with that. And it's also handy for a lot of things in the kitchen if you have, it's a scraper, And then this I won't lift, but this is a big, heavy, I can barely lift it. It's so heavy. This has probably rolled hundreds, if not 1,000 miles with me over the years. This is my turntable. And the heavier the better, because if you get a big wedding cake on here, you want some weight to hold that much cake. If you get a 3 or 4 tiered cake that you're decorating and you want to be able to turn it while you're working on it. So this thing weighs 15 pounds probably. It is what brand? And it's got like a big rubber bottom Fat Daddy-O. Super heavy, and rolls like a dream. So definitely if you're going to do this, and I won't even say if you're going to do this as a business, get one of these. I wouldn't recommend doing this as a business. That's why I don't do it as a business. But that's it's a story for another time. I have written many blog posts about why I don't do cakes anymore. If you love to bake and people say you bake so well, you should do this and sell them, slap them. If you get to doing wedding cakes and you do it as a business, it will take over your life and you'll have no life. You'll have no weekend. You will have no weeknights. You will have no evenings. You won't have anything except cake. And if you like to do the whole job like I do, you won't have any life at all. Unless you like to hire people and then random ramble, you'll be hiring people and you won't be doing the job that you originally loved to begin with. So side note, we won't go there. This is just me doing this as a favor for a family member. Quick tutorial on using this cake. I don't even know what it's called. There's probably a name for it, but you're just going to set it. Make sure you set both sides the same. This has got 3 little marks before the wire where it's attached there. And you can see that that's nicely cutting that in half. And it's this easy. You're going to just kind of do a back and forth motion and pull it through the cake. And you can do this with a big knife, but this way you really know that you're getting a nice level division. And then we're going to take a cake board. These are 8-inch, and you've got a nice chilled cake, so this is easier to work with. And then that one's ready, and then this one's ready to fill. We're going to do that, and we're going to do this with 4 layers. One more thing that I always do just for convenience sake, I've put these tips in these bags, and I will say these are a little small. For if you're doing big volume wedding cakes, I would go with a much bigger bag because you're going to want icing in this, and then you want room to gather it, and that is not going to hold much. But this is a little cake, so this is going to work. I just got these at Michael's. So I just do a glass just to hold your icing so you're not laying the bag down on the counter in between using it. And what I used to do when I did these full time, I usually have a little bit of sticky tack. You know what? I might use a piece of tape, but I usually have a little piece of sticky, just that gummy sticky tack to put here, because you put your cake there and you start decorating and doing stuff and it can move around a little bit more than you want. So we are going to totally just improvise. We're improvising a lot here lately. But again, like I said, I have not done wedding cakes full time. I think I quit doing wedding cakes full time. The last one I did was 2014. So I just put a little bit of masking tape under that just to hopefully, yeah, that won't move around as much. So Then what you're going to do, and you can, if you have the adapters, there's a white, I didn't pull it out of storage, but there's a white adapter that I used to always use that you would use to attach a tip. It's a connector so you can change tips out. And I didn't grab one, I just did this instead. But if you were using that, it's nice because it's just a, you know, just a hole. Anyway, we're going to do a star tip. So you're going to put some of your frosting, your finishing icing, because these are fillings, but this is my actual buttercream. We're going to put some of that, just put some in the bag with your icing spatula. So you're just going to put a line around the hole, because this is what's going to hold the filling in so it doesn't leak out. And I wish I had gotten that round tip because I'm not loving the star tip as much for a solid line. But you just want, basically you're making a dam. I think that's what it was called in the cake day, in the cake lingo for it is an icing dam. And then we're going to fill that with my old various, this is a smaller little spatula. And this is a gorgeous, really rich chocolate fudge filling that is just to die for. If I get enough comments about this, I will share the recipe. But, you know, this is really not about how, this isn't a how to bake video. It's how to, I'm assuming if you are here, you know how to bake. And someone has asked you to make a cake, so you must be a good baker. So these aren't hard. I mean, if you're, you know, if you bake and you want to try this, this is just really to help you feel like you can do it. It's not rocket science in any way, shape, or form, but there are some things to know so you don't have a cake disaster and possibly have relatives who hate you. But again, I mean, speaking from long, hard experience, I would highly recommend not doing this as a business. And we are going to, that one, you know what, I need, I need this. See, when I had the bakery, I had more than one of these. So you can have one on hand that's clean and one on hand that's got icing in it, yada, yada. But we have moved on with life. Your next layer goes right on top. And make sure that these are nice and straight because we cut them straight and because we did the parchment. Remember the parchment that we talked about earlier. See, now I don't have a clean spatula to do this. It's like you're just hanging out in my kitchen, isn't it? It's kind of what we're doing. I'm in the kitchen and I just turned on the camera. Someone said you should just turn on the camera, and so I did. And a lot of this will get edited out. So we'll see how much. I lose interest if I'm watching a video and there's too much rambly ramble. So unless you like that kind of thing, and then you can stick around and I'll keep rambling. Could almost do this live, but that might be even really more, you know, more boring. So and my hand, I mean, I'm out of practice. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're trying to get this off. I need my other. So we do need another spatula, and I should have kept that second big spatula, shouldn't I? So we're gonna just do this. Give this, see, I mean, the turntable is like, you could do a cake without a turntable, but I wouldn't want to. It just makes life a lot easier. So there's that one. And then we are going to do this one. Same thing, we're just gonna slide it over carefully. Make sure it's centered, and we're gonna go. And the other thing I love about torting cakes, which is where you cut them into multiple layers instead of just 2 layers of cake and 1 layer of filling, is that you get a nice deep, tall, especially when you're making wedding cakes, it makes a nice, beautiful, tall, see how tall that's gonna be? It makes a terrific layer, you know, for your layered look. Once you get the hang of this, I think the fastest, my fastest cake, and the ones I remember stories about almost every single cake. The fastest one I ever did was a 3-tiered cake, a 6, an 8, and a 10, I think. It was baked, and I got to the shop and did all of this, filled, iced, stacked, and decorated in 2 or 2.5 hours. So fast, it was such a rush. It was a last-minute wedding, and it just went out the door quick, but it was really pretty. It turned out all right. Another little trick from back in the day for when you're putting these in and this isn't the kind of glass I would use when we have the bakery, but whatever you have. Little trick for filling this. If you have the right size of glass, this works really well, but you can fold it down over the glass to fill with your icing, just so you're not trying to get your hand in there and do all of that. Just drop some in, and you can push it down in with a spatula. Let's talk about also the finish on this particular cake. nephew is getting married, and his bride-to-be has asked for something I didn't do back in the day because it's been so long since I've been out of cakes. And it is, I'll show you, I'll put a picture somewhere on the screen here of the inspiration cake. But what we're doing is what I would have called back in the day just almost a crumb-coated cake. I think nowadays it's called like a semi-naked cake or something like that. So you're going to take this icing tip and the flat edge and a serrated edge. We're going to use the flat edge facing out, and the serrated edge is towards the cake. If you are crumb coating, which I highly recommend, do not do this. Any cake you do, and normally I would crumb coat and then chill and then ice. So we're going to just put it right to right on just the surface of the cake, almost like you're just scraping on some icing. Just give it a squeeze as it comes out and turn, and see how you just get, you're just wanting a light skim of icing. And as you come around, you just go up to the next layer. And like I said, when you get used to doing this, you can get these done really quick. And you're just, basically the crumb coat is what it sounds like. It's just to seal in crumbs. And then the top, same thing, and you're just basically putting enough on there to do kind of a seal coat. And this poor little bag is so small, but I don't need much icing. So we're going to do that, stash that. This is where this spatula comes in. You're just going to hold it to the side of the cake and turn it again. You're turning it pulling towards you, and just kind of let the icing do the work, if that makes sense. You're just filling in the gaps and you're basically pulling off quite a bit of the icing you just put on and leaving a sealed. So all those crumbs are sealed in, and some have come off in there. You don't want to put that back in there. You could use this to crumb coat another cake, I guess, but I don't. We're going to put some extra in the middle because we have a little bit of a divot there. And you just, same thing on the top. And you know, your first time doing this, it's not going to go this quickly maybe, but this is not hard. And just keep, the thing you want to be careful with is that you don't, and again, if you're using a warm cake, oh my gosh, just don't use a warm cake. You'll pull it apart. You will literally just demolish it trying to do this. And then you'll be crying and rebaking your cake. So don't do it. We're going to just go out to the edge a bit like that. You just want to seal up. And then if you see that little lip sticking up, you just take the knife and pull it towards you. And that pulls that edge and makes a nice sharp edge. See the little edge, and just pull straight towards you like that. There, I'm going to leave that for now. Give it one more little turn just to clean up the bottom. Make sure we're all sealed in, and then as you saw in that picture I posted, we're going to want some of this cake showing through. So I am going to put this one's crumb coated and finished, and then this, you go under it like that, and then that goes in the fridge to chill until that is nice and firm. And then you can come back and you're going to do it again with icing, but that way you're not pulling crumbs into the next layer. So I'm going to go put this in the fridge, and then we're going to do the smaller layer, and then we'll finish icing this, and then it's done because I'm not doing any decorating on this one. We're going to put fresh flowers on it at the wedding. All right, we're going to start on the little 6-inch layer cake, and this one has the custom fillings. So since we have 4 layers of cake, 3 layers of filling, we have caramel latte, sort of creme brulee flavored cake, and I made fresh Bavarian cream last night. So this has been sitting all night and it's set up nicely. So we are going to do a layer of Bavarian cream, and then the middle layer will be a caramel sauce that I just made, and then the third layer will be another layer of Bavarian cream. So the whole thing should taste like creme brulee in a bite of cake. So let's see how this goes. If you make custards, make sure you make them early enough so they have time to set up. This one has set up nicely. Mousse, the same thing. You want to make sure that you get a nice solid. See how that's nice and solid? And we're going to just I'm trying not to like disturb the set of it, if that makes sense, because it's got whipped cream. It's a custard that you make and then it's chilled a little and you fold whipped cream into it. If you are making these for summer weddings, especially outdoor summer weddings, and somebody wants mousse filled cake or custard filled cake, you want to show up at the last possible minute with that scenario, right out of the fridge, right to the venue and set it up. But there is, especially for mousse, there is a whipped cream stabilizer that you can get, and add that to your whipped cream, and that will give you a lot more longevity for any kind of a mousse filled cake. So there's a nice layer of Bavarian cream. Then we're going to put the next layer, and always keep a little rag handy because you're going to just end up with cake crumbs everywhere. There's no avoiding the cake crumbs. Do your little dam. And again, I would rather see I'd rather see us use a round tip, so a big round tip for that would be nice. This is the caramel sauce that I made, and I'm thinking that there's a caramel sauce you can make, like a caramel filling, that would probably be not as saucy as this. We're going to roll with this, but we're not going to make it very thick, and we're not going to lay it on very heavy for this layer. This is just a middle layer that's going to have a line of caramel. But if you get too much liquidy going on in there, your layers are going to shift apart. You could have them leak. I haven't had mishaps at weddings, but I've had things go wrong in the bakery where it's like, whoa, that did not work. I know marshmallow cream as an idea does not work well on cupcakes. So we're just going to put this in like basically like a sauce, but it'll soak, hopefully this will soak into the layers of this cake. So it won't be very thick as far as a line of caramel. And then we're going to put the next layer. This has got a little bit, seems like a little bit lower side, and this one has a little bit higher side. So kind of look at what you've got, and then you can get more of a straight top. Another thing to watch when you're filling your icing bags, make sure that you push out any big air pockets, because it'll make a big blowout, while you're piping. And even if you're decorating, especially if you're decorating, if you're doing something with finer tips and doing, decorative work on the outside of a cake, make sure you don't have air pockets in that icing, because when you hit the air pocket, it'll go poof, and it'll just blow out. So we're done with the caramel sauce, and this is the last layer that's going to be more of this gorgeous Bavarian cream, which we're just going to kind of we're just kind of placing it, because you can almost slice this, which is nice. So like I said, it stays nice and solid, and I'm just going to kind of flatten it, but I'm not going to mush it around, squash it or do anything really disturb it very much. We're just going to make sure it goes out to the edge of that little icing dam. And obviously too, if you're putting any kind of filling like this, like Bavarian cream or a mousse or anything that needs refrigerated, you have to refrigerate the cake, and you need to tell the bride and groom or whoever you're making it for that they need to refrigerate the cake, because they may not know that, and that's a problem. You cannot leave these sitting out. And if you're doing an Italian meringue cake, also don't leave it sitting out. All right, that's the top. Look how deep that is. Isn't that gorgeous? So that is going to make a really nice tall layers. When you put this together, it won't look little. So same thing, just added some more icing to the icing bag. We're going to crumb coat this and get it chilling. Make sure you don't have any crumbs around the bottom, just to make your life easy. Take your spatula, and just like we did on the other cake, and this is where you'd want to make sure you're kind of stuck to the turntable with some kind of sticky tack or tape, because you do not want to start doing this, because you're putting kind of quite a bit of pressure on this cake as you're pulling this spatula around it, and you do not want to have it suddenly pull towards you and, God forbid, fall off, like fall off the turntable, or you don't want to have that kind of a mishap here in this right now. All right, so there is a crumb coat, and then go under that, give it a little twist because it's taped on, carefully pull it to the edge, and then this goes out in the fridge with the other one, and we'll be back when they're chilled to put the last coat of icing on. This has been in the fridge, so it is chilled enough. It's still got a little bit of tape on the bottom, so I'm just going to go ahead and put it back. And in the meantime, I realized I didn't make enough buttercream, so I had to make more of that. We have that here, and we're going to put the second coat on this, and then I'll show you how to, and this is a step do not skip if you're making a stacked layered cake of any kind. As far as tiers, you have to have, we talked about this in the beginning, dowels, and you will be putting these in the cake like that, down through this cake, and cutting them at height to support that next layer, or you will end up being on cake disasters websites everywhere, because the cake above will sink down into the cake below and the whole thing will come apart. Not good. We're going to add new fresh buttercream that I just made, or added it to the buttercream I already had. I just didn't have enough, and there's nothing worse if you have to make more, like I just did. If you have to make more, and I had a little bit of the stuff I made to begin with and some new, even though you use the same recipe and the same method and all of that, you may end up with two slightly different shades of buttercream. So do not forget, mix them, combine them together. So I made one, I had some left of the other one, I added the first batch into the second batch and whipped them really well, so that what you're using for this whole project is the same color, because you don't have two different shades of icing. Even if it's a slight difference, you really don't want to do that. So this is nice and firm and chilled. So when I put this icing on it, it's not going to pull anything around, because that's all kind of sealed in and solid. Since we want a cake, normally you would do a cake and you're going to cover all of this. You don't want to see any of these crumbs through the cake. This design, we want to see some of the cake, like the shadows of the cake. It's kind of a rustic look, so we're going to do that. So what I'm going to do, and this, your same thing, you're doing the same thing, but you're putting it not so straight onto the cake at a tight angle and pushing harder to scrape it thinner. You're going to, because you see how nice and wide that edge is? You want that almost that thick on regular icing. We're going to just put it more, you know, more parallel to the cake. So you're laying out more of a thicker layer, and you can see that. And then we're going to remove quite a bit of it as we go. So we're going to just go a thicker layer and keep going just like we did with the crumb coating, but we're just adding thicker. And kind of no matter how you do this, you're going to end up with icing and crumbs and sticky things everywhere. You're going to have a mess. Your kitchen's going to be a mess. My kitchen floor is always, it's a mess. There's crumbs everywhere. There's icing everywhere else. Like, it's going to be a mess. And then we're going to grab the trusty spatula and do our first go, and you're just kind of evening everything out. And you're also pulling some off. See how much came off? And you want to keep a nice straight up and down. So your sides are nice and straight like that. Actually, I'm going to put that on top, and you can do that. And then I just put the center of the blade, not quite to the center of the cake, but almost, and just rotate under. You're not turning the blade so much as you're turning the cake under the blade. And then you can fill in any little gaps, and just keep spinning. And now I want to put a little more pressure to take off some of what I just did, because we want to be able to possibly see some of the cake through this. Pull that, and then you just keep putting it off into the bowl. I'm just going to go around again and pull a little more off, staying really straight. So because you want, when you look at this straight on, you want to see nice straight up and down sides. And you can see how that pulled up to that top layer. Again, you just pull towards you, and you see how that just comes, and it makes a nice square, square edge for the top. Okay, and then I'm going to keep going because we still want to pull more off. I just want to see, I guess, like back in my day, we didn't, it would be, in 2009, it would have been horrifying to see the cake through the icing. Like, the shadow of the cake was like a huge no-no. So it's funny how times change. And a little trick, but you can also, to get the icing really, really, really satin smooth, you can, instead of keeping it, see how there's icing on the blade? You can wash that blade off and actually get it hot or get it wet. Dip it in some water. So I just gave that a quick rinse. And so this blade has now got a little bit of water on it, and you can run that around, and it helps just smooth out a little bit of the air bubbles that you're going to see in the icing along the sides of the cake. And I'm just going to keep putting a little bit of pressure just so we start to see some cake through there. And as long as you're not pulling cake into this, you can keep putting it back in the bowl. And we're going to go straight, kind of clean up that bottom edge a little. Because you also, since this won't be a decorated cake and it won't have any piped borders, you don't want to see that board. There's a board under the cake, and you don't want to see that in the finished cake. You don't want to see a cardboard round sticking out at the bottom. That's, like, I really wouldn't want to see that. And the center is not as important because there's going to be another cake sitting on top of that. Now, if you want, you can pull out the scraper blade, and I'm going to just put a little bit of water on that. Just run a little line of hot water, and that you're going to turn it. I'm left-handed, so this will be different for everyone. But you want to set it so it's very straight up and down on this tray, and we're just basically, again, getting a nice straight up and down line, and you're pulling icing off. You can see where there's low and high spots just by what comes off on the blade. And just run it tight to the side of the cake. Because the idea of this, again, this is supposed to look kind of rustic, which this might be a good cake to start with. If you've never done cake, this would be a great style where you're not, stressing out so much about the perfection, because here you have visible lines and visible cake and all that. You just keep going until you're happy with what you're doing. And you want to keep the turntable moving, or you'll end up with marks where you paused the blade. And you'll get a little indent wherever you slow down or stop. This blade has got some hot water on it too, so it's just kind of bringing some of that smooth to that top edge. And especially your last round, you want to just go a smooth round and just pull the blade off, kind of in as much of a one motion as possible to not have a line showing where you pulled the blade off. And I can barely see where I pulled it off. And where you do have a little line, you just make that the back of the cake. Anywhere there's something not as perfect, that's the back. I've had a lot of backs of cakes that have turned out over the years like, welp, that's the back. Like, for example, see, there's a dark bit of cake showing right there that I can't get rid of. So that's the back. So we are just going to tidy up our top edge with a hot little bit of water on the blade, but not too much. You don't want you don't want water getting on, you don't want a cake that's getting wet. Just a little bit of water on the blade will help. And just look across, make sure that you look like you've got a level top edge. The next thing you're going to do, and this is the most important thing, if you're doing a layered cake, this is the size of the next round that's going to be sitting on top of this. That next layer is going to go on top. So what I'm going to do is just, you can kind of see where it's going to be. I don't want to set it down on there and make a mark per se. I'm going to put 4 support dowels in here, which means we're going to probably going to cut 2 of these in half. So what you do, go well within your, oh gosh, that's heavy. Go well within what you know is going to be, a 6-inch is going to leave an inch on each side. So we want to be just in from that. And it's just this easy. You just push straight down like that. And I literally and have some kind of cutters that are clean. Snippers, scissors, kitchen shears won't probably do it. I had a special pair of basically pruning shears that were just for this, that are like a flat blade rather than an offset blade. And I just mark it with my thumb, pull it out, and you're going to cut it just below where my thumb is marked, because you want to have it where that next cake will settle into the icing just a little tiny bit. You don't want it sitting up. You don't want it floating up. So you just want to be just a hair under what you marked. I'll be right back. And once you have that cut, then what I do is use that to mark the depth for all of these other. So I'm going to do 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have enough out of that dowel to do another one. And you just line them up and cut as many as you need using that same line. So you want them to all be the exact same length. And what I will actually do once I got 3 out of that one, just put them down on the counter and look across them and make sure you've got an even height. And I'm going to do one more. Okay, so then you're going to stick that one back down where it was. And I've finished pushing it in with another dowel just because I don't want to get my fingers in the actual cake. And then we're just going to do a set of 4. So 1, 2, and just make a little support square. You're just basically making a little platform for that next layered cake to sit on. And that one goes straight down in. And I have a scrap. Yes, I have a scrap to use. And then this one goes straight down in like that, just so the next cake isn't sinking down into the icing. The main thing is you do not want to have no support under that next cake. All right, so we've got the next cake ready to go. I'm just going to set it aside while we take this one off. And use the same spatula to lift these off so you don't mess up your edges. And you get a feel for it, but just lift it up and rotate it out, kind of rotate the turntable out from under it so you get your hand under it. And the tape is still under there, so I'm going to take that off. So we're going to set that right over here, just where it's undisturbed, carefully. All right, and we're just doing the same exact thing with the littler cake. And that is perfectly how we wanted it to look. So I'm going to leave that as done. Smooth this top a little, and this is going to have flowers on top. So we want to have it pretty level because this is going to be that, the top cake that people see when they come in and look at the cake. And this is where you don't want to leave any icing on each time you come back and do anything, because the icing that's on it will drag against the icing on the cake and it'll make a mess. Keep a clean edge as much as you can right at this last bit. That's perfect. Whew. Love it. Okay, rustic, some cake showing through, some lines showing, some rusticness. And then what we're going to finish it with is going to be flowers, flowers, flowers. So we are going to move everything out of the way, and I will show you the scary part, which is not scary once you've done it hundreds of times, but it's always a little bit daunting. Get this blade really nice and dry, and we're going to need to clean this turntable, clean it off, and get it also really dry. I'm going to take this layer off here. Again, be very careful taking this off now that it's finished, because you do not want to bump your final perfect icing. And also with the water, you don't want it to get under and get on this cardboard that's under this cake, because wet cardboard under cake, disaster. So before we grab the cake layers, we need a baseboard, and that will depend on what you're putting under your cake. We are just using a simple baseboard from Michael's. And like I said in the beginning, her cake, the cake display that they're putting it on is only 11 inches, so we went with a 10-inch board. Normally for an 8-inch base cake, I would always do a 12-inch board, just so you have that 2-inch border around it. So we're going to carefully put that on there. And if you want, again, we're going to dowel down through this. You pick one dowel when you're done, run it through the pencil sharpener and get a nice point, and we're going to hammer that down through both cakes and into this baseboard. So once this is supported and doweled, you can drive this around, you can hit bumps, you can take corners. It's going to be in a box. I have delivered cakes all over the place like this. So I'm going to put a piece of tape under here just for my own peace of mind. And you know what? I'm going to put a piece of tape under it too, because we're going to be turning this and doing some stuff. So I am going to put a piece of tape back there. So we're going to grab your carefully iced cake and pick a front of your baseboard, whether that matters or not. And we want to make sure that we're very centered on it, where you have just an inch. This one only gives you an inch. So kind of keep the spatula there and make sure that you have it centered the way you want, because you're going to you want it to be uniform. Okay. And this is also where you're going to want to decide what is the front and what is the back of these layers. And if you bump it, just take your spatula and do that. So I'm going to give this a turn. And like we said, that probably needs to be on the back, and I want that more on the back, which means we're going to call this the front. So I'm going to put that facing away. And this is just a little hack. If you're going to make any mistakes when you're putting this thing together, you do not want the front facing you in case you mess up the cake. You don't want to mess up your front. And whatever you do, don't put any toppers on until you have it sitting at the venue. Okay, so that's the front. So we want that basically facing away from us. Also, if you are doing this at home, watch this. Do not bump that on that when you... I've done that too. The next thing I want to do is decide what's the front of this other beautiful little layer. And this one looks really good. I'm going to say that that is probably the front, which means that needs to be away from me. And all you're going to do is take that spatula and your fingers, and you got to center it as you come down, because you only really get one shot at this. And you're just going to set it and pull the spatula out. And it's sitting on the dowels that are supporting it, and it's got about an inch between each. And see this, I don't want to see that cardboard right there. So that is going to be, that's the back of this cake. And see the front, you don't see the cardboard, which is what I prefer. And I'm just going to take this spatula and just touch a little crumb right there. You can just kind of do a little bit of cleanup. And normally, again, if you were decorating this fully, this is where you would start piping your borders in any of your decorative elements that you're going to put on this cake. But this is done. And we're going to go, we're going to put the dowel down through it, and then we're going to box it up and deliver it tomorrow. And I will take some final little clips of what it looks like on the cake table at the wedding tomorrow with the flowers. It'll have fresh flowers here, here, and here. So the next thing, and this is the fun part, where remember I said in the beginning that you will need a hammer, and also be careful hammering around cakes. You do not want to hammer your cake. We have four support dowels. So you want this to go down through the center. Measure, again, see, that's longer than the cake. So you're going to want to take off just enough to go down below the level of the cake. And you're going to be just a little bit into the dowel board. So we're going to cut off about that much, like that. And then you want to save the piece that you cut off, because you're going to need it. Take this, and this is kind of scary, but you'll be so glad you did it. Find the center of your cake and just push it down until you get to that board that's under this. And this is where you take your little hammer and you just give it a quick sharp whack, and it goes down through that cardboard. And then you can use it to go down, 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 down. And then this is where you use the other piece just as a little follower, because you don't want to be anywhere near the top of this cake with a hammer, for obvious reasons. And then you can feel the baseboard, and you just give it a couple really good whacks. So I have hammered that down into that baseboard. This cake is not going anywhere, I promise. And that's it. And if you want, you can take a little dab of the icing and just cover that little divot. And make sure you tell, like I've already talked to the bride about this cake and what we're, all the when you're cutting it apart, there's some disassembly required. So I've already explained to her when they cut into this that there's a board between it, and there are dowels down inside this cake, and there is a dowel they'll run into. So you won't be able to take this cake apart. They're going to need to cut all the pieces off of this, take that off, and then you'll be able to pull that dowel out and disassemble this that way. So that's it. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll look at what the finished decorated cake looks like. Thanks for hanging out with me today. This has been fun. It's a little bit of everything, and I'm just going to try this out, and this is my little test so we can see what the wedding cake will taste like. You really have to try this. I mean, you should try assembling a cake too, but caramel cake with caramel sauce, Bavarian cream, and buttercream. Bye.